All right. Good evening, zoology people. Hope y'all are doing well. I hope you've had a good week. I hope you've had a chance to look over the previous discussions on amphibians. So now I want to get to the last group. So let's go to our PowerPoint here. And again, for me personally, this is a very fun group to discuss. Lots of neat modifications and very cool species and ecology, lots of neat stuff, right? So order Anura. So we know there's three orders in the amphibian class. We talk about the Sicilians, we talk about salamanders now, we talk about the frogs and toads. So a diverse group, right? About 50 families, 6,700 species. So some very plain, very common, some very unique. Some do very normal things, some do very crazy things. So we're gonna kind of look at all of these and hope to get through all of this today. So we find these anurans in all continents except Antarctica. Too cold. They have not been able to establish there. They would always be just dormant, right? They couldn't survive. There's not enough food, heat availability for them there. So not that difficult to understand why they're not found there, but common in other parts of the world. Something anatomically that's unique to the anurans is this thing we call a Eurostyle. So this is just the breakdown of the families, the Idae, right? Bufonidae are your common toads, Centralidae, the glass frogs, Hylidae, the tree frogs, Leptodactylus, Microhylidae, Pipidae, very strange. I'll show you those. So ranids are your just normal common frogs. So lots of neat, lots of variation, lots of just different distribution. But coming back to that Eurostyle, right? So we look at the just pretty basic skeletal structure of the salamanders. We look then at this modification of that Eurostyle. So if we look at the vertebrae of frogs, they have very few vertebrae. They have this sort of fused vertebrae that becomes, it's technically part of the pelvic girdle. So there's our sacrum, our ilium or ischium are different sort of bone structure. But what that causes, it basically provides a very, very strong flexion point for these large hind limbs. So it gives them an ability to hop and to basically as shock absorber when they land as well. Very strong pelvic structure for the impact for the hopping frogs. Not all frogs hop. Some are going to kind of climb, walk around. But that Eurostyle is a unique skeletal modification that we don't see in any other of the amphibians except for the frogs, the anurans. So again, there's again that modification that we find in the anuran group, that Eurostyle. Very few vertebrae, compressed vertebrae, and then that elongated pelvic girdle. I just want to make a little brief distinction, and really taxonomically, there's not a big distinction between anurans. Anurans include both frogs and toads. The common vocabulary, the common folk would kind of distinguish a frog from a toad. There's exceptions to both, right? But I'm just going to put this out there. So frogs are typically a little bit more aquatic. So if you're a little bit more aquatic, you have fewer modifications for being non-aquatic, for being in the dry habitat. They're going to have more streamlined, pointy snouts, more hydrodynamic structure. They're going to have, bigger feet for propulsion, webbed feet, less keratin. If you're in water, you don't have to stay as dry. You don't have to drying out is not as big a risk factor, I should say. So less keratin, more aquatic lifestyle. Toads tend to have a little bit more terrestrial existence. They live on land more, but they have to stay moist. Again, they can dehydrate. They have a little bit more keratin, so their skin is going to be a little thicker. Can be too thick because it impedes their cutaneous respiration, right? They're going to have more glands that secrete mucus to help keep them moist. They're going to just be more bumpy and warty. They have more little bumps. And again, there's exceptions. There's some very bumpy, warty frogs. There's some toads that are quite smooth. It doesn't always hold true. But when you hear toad and frog, that's kind of the distinction that they're talking about. Both have well-developed larynx, so both have that gular fold. They have the ability to vocalize. They make these long calls, loud calls that can resonate for breeding purposes there. So I just put together some pictures here of some of the diversity of these this group, the Anura group. Really cool. Some of the tree frogs masterfully adapted to their life in the forest. So green coloration for camouflage, vertical pupils for night vision. Again, not the bulky, strong legs for hopping. They're going to kind of crawl around more in this forest canopy there, right? We see some toads. This is a very frog-like toad, quote-unquote toad. You can see a little bit rougher skin, not necessarily designed for swimming, more kind of crawling and walking, but still in very moist habitats there. The red-eyed tree frog, one of my favorite species, very lanky species, brightly colored, red eyes, nocturnal, just really cool. Other toads that, again, have really cool coloration that helps them to camouflage, helps them to attract other individuals, communicate sort of with their color. Lots of neat stuff going on. These guys are fun, right? These are fun. The little rain frogs, breviceps. So the little grumpy frogs, the grumpy character of the Anuran world. I'll put some videos or a video or two that highlight these little guys, rain frogs. They either look super cute or just super grumpy, I don't know. But the little rain frogs, small little guys there. Flying frogs. So they don't technically fly, but they're gliding frogs, right? So these frogs have these very elongated fingers and lots of webbing in these fingers and toes. So when they jump, they literally extend these out and they can kind of have like a little gliding sort of membranes there that help them to kind of go far distances in the forest. So just really neat. So much coolness, if you will, in this group here. Again, frogs, a typical frog, bullfrogs and leopard frogs. The red-eyed tree frog are little poison dart frogs, colorful, what we call aposematic colored individuals. So lots of variation there. I'm not doing them justice again. There's just so many neat species. We would spend a whole semester just looking at individual species if that was the course. But unfortunately, we got to move forward. We get into just a generalized reproductive behavior. So it's going to vary from species to species, but collectively, most of them have this type of behavior. So it typically involves some sort of water supply, water source. The males will kind of get to that area first, and they start to call, they vocalize. So voice, tone, volume, all that can be important in attracting the female. Right? So the males call, they attract the females. The females are attracted, they come to this area. And then we have this process called amplexus. So amplexus, I will kind of elaborate a lot on amplexus and expect you to understand what that purpose is, what it is, how it has an impact on the biology, the ecology of these frogs. So amplexus is basically a gripping process. And it's going to vary again in how it's done, where it's done, but these amphibians, these anurans don't have a copulatory organ. They don't have a phalloidium like the caecilians, right? So they have external fertilization like fish, basically. So the male has to entice the female to release the eggs. Once the female finds a male she's comfortable with, she releases the eggs, and then the male releases the sperm. But there's a pre-mating rituals that happen, varies from species to species. And then basically the male has to ensure that he's in close proximity. And if you look at the thumbs of many males, they have a lot of intricate modifications, like little cleats. They have very strong little Popeye forearms, and that's going to help them sort of wrap around, kind of get that thumb in there for traction and hold on, basically. So that's what we term as amplexus. We have the idea of sort of once the eggs are laid, they're released, they're going to be incubated by the sun, by the temperature of the pond, the water. And then the aquatic eggs hatch as tadpoles. Over time, they'll metamorphose out into frogs. Again, big, I'm not going to say stressful, but it's a hazardous time. It's a very big change that they shift from basically a fish with a lateral line eating plant material to a carnivorous frog. They lose their gills and they develop lungs, and then the cutaneous aspect as well. Digestive changes, sensory changes, the eyes improve, the tympanum, the ear improves. So lots of changes that go on in that metamorphosis phase, right? But let me back up here to amplexus. Well, first, there's the lung that develops, the vocal sac. This is how the males then would call and attract the females. Once the female is here, it gets kind of interesting. Depends on the species, how and where the amplexus occurs. So again, there's a little rain frog there, little male. So it gets kind of interesting, I guess. Lots of variation there in amplexus for frogs. So this one's odd there. The red-eyed tree frogs again, showing you that sort of typical axillary or almost cephalic type of amplexus, but the male and then the female. So the male's in amplexus and he's still calling, right? So I guess still not satisfied there, right? But we have this big mating mass of toads trying to amplex whoever comes by, I guess. And you can see here the ventral view from the belly, how the male's arms are tucked under there and in amplexus of the female. So again, an important part of the reproductive process. If the male can't amplex a female, he cannot ensure that he's going to be the one in close proximity to fertilize those eggs. Different looking frogs here. This very eager frog, and not even the right species, not even the right order of animal there. But this happens often. It's dark. I don't know. They're in the mood. So this is a very typical, very common scenario that you can find these amplexing frogs in. So again, amplexus work. The female laid the eggs. The male will fertilize. Female releases the eggs. Male releases sperm. We have external fertilization. And then the eggs would then incubate. Eggs would incubate in that area there. So when the tadpoles are basically hatched, they have long fins. They have very long fin. Basically, they're fish in essence. They have the lateral line like a fish. They have gills, no legs. They have very specialized mouth parts that enable them to feed on algae and plant material. When they metamorphose, they reabsorb the tail, sort of elongate the legs, develop the forelegs. The eyes become a lot bigger. You see how tiny that little eye is? The eye becomes more dominant. No external ear. The external ear develops. So just a big change again from tadpole to adult. So there's the amplexus, eggs hatch, tadpoles reabsorb the tail, legs develop, and then they kind of go into the adult phase there. So again, there's a lot of variations in the timing, a lot of variations in the actual little mechanisms, but this is the generalized view that works for most of these amphibians, most of the anurans. Yeah, so just generic life cycle of a leopard frog. And this is just trying to show you the percent of prey that they capture, right? So it's going to be different. It's just trying to highlight that they feed on different things, right? So they're preying on different things, they're feeding on different things as they transition. So it's a dietary shift. So that requires a shift in the prey that you're searching for, a shift in the digestive system itself, right? So lots of change. That's the big theme here. Lots of change in that metamorphosis process. Now, I do want to highlight a few very unique strategies. The Darwin's toad, we have the mouth brooding toads, kind of weird. Pipa, the Suriname toad, they're going to have a very unique way of developing the offspring, kind of related to Pipa, a little bit different. We have tadpoles that develop in the backs of the parents, and then we have tadpoles that are carried on the back. A lot of poison dart frogs will carry their little tadpoles from little water source to water source to water source. So lots of neat aspects. We do have parental behavior that kicks in as well. So lots of variation here. The glass frogs, they're really cool. Foam nesting frogs, mouth brooders. There's Pipa, the back, or Gastrotheca. We have different types of brooding in these anurans. It gets quite elaborate, quite diverse. Yeah, so there's this guy here. So basically they start to develop in the back. Right? So they're kind of set into the skin, and the male can hop around, the female can hop around, and the eggs are kind of attached there in the back. Here we have poison dart frogs. And again, they have maybe not these huge water ponds at the bottom of the rainforest, but instead they'll be in little plants, like little plants. Think of not quite the right species, but like an agave plant. These little bromeliads that kind of have overlapping leaves, they collect water, and the males can then put their little tadpole in there. If that little water dries up, they can kind of take the tadpoles on their back. The tadpoles suck on, and the male can transfer them from place to different water supplies. So again, there is a fair amount of parental care that we see here. Same idea. Poison dart frog transferring his little lone tadpole from one water source to another. Different view, same concept. Yeah, we saw this one earlier. Pipas, these are odd, right? I'm gonna link some videos. Like, it's gonna show it a lot better than what I can explain it. But what you're looking at is the mom, right? So the babies develop on mom's back, basically, kind of like this, but even more drastic. So the babies are, or the eggs are fertilized. There's a really kind of weird dance motion that the parents do. The male basically pounds the eggs into the mom's back. Mom puts a layer of skin on top, and that's where the babies basically grow from, right? So it's strange. It's really strange. I'll let the video do a better job than what I'm explaining here. But really odd toads. Pipa. All right, so let me just stop that there so this doesn't get super long. Then I'm gonna change gears and we'll look at another aspect on the endurance.